Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Bismillah. Bismillah walhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So, I'm sorry we're starting a little late. I just thought the first halaqah ended at 7:15 and not 7 o'clock. So I apologize for that. I'll make sure I'm not late next time. So last week when we met, we talked about the experience of the Prophet ﷺ receiving first revelation and what that was like experientially, going to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. We talked a lot in detail of just what it was like to also have Khadija in the Prophet's life, just the beauty of their relationship that they had, and where there was moments of rest, like pauses in the experience of receiving that initial revelation of Iqra, where we need rest in between, like difficulty, moments of stress in our life. People recall what it is that we're talking about here? Yeah. So we wanted to move now into some of the other stuff that was happening at that time and start linking this also as best as we can to Quran and what's happening in real time. Because now, with the revelation coming to the Prophet, he is, in the most literal sense of the word, like a prophet of God. The wahi experience of the 6 months of like true dreams, in addition to the angel Gabriel coming with this revelation, it introduces now an interesting dynamic in the Meccan society, because these were people that we're taught did not have a prophet ever, right? All of the prophets were pretty much going in large part to other locales and communities. And so in a bit, we'll talk about some of what this means. But there's now other milestones that are taking place at this time. And we want to, as best as we can, start to attach it to revelation that's also taking place in real time, so that we can see how it relates to the Seerah, as well as how the Seerah is a necessary, sometimes variable, for us to make the Quran like very concrete. Because if you see the Prophet's life as a manifestation of the Quran, which it is, it becomes hard then to make Islam something that it's not. Do you know? Somebody tells you, well, in Islam, we don't X, Y, or Z, but you know in the Seerah, like the Prophet did this. Someone says, you can't marry across cultures. Do you know? But like, what in the prophetic biography do you find other than people welcoming people in across backgrounds, right? You see the dynamics of how people are engaged in the treatment of converts. Literally, everyone we're going to talk about for months now is going to be a convert to Islam. Some people say Waraka, who was the Khadija's cousin that we talked about last week, who is arguably like the first, if not one of the first converts to Islam, because the only other time we see him in the hadith, other than these days, and this hadith we looked at last week that talks about Revelation, says at the end of it, Waraka died some days later, right? Do you remember when we were looking at it? But then there's a hadith where the Prophet mentions him and says that he's seen him in Jannah, in paradise, wearing like these silk robes, meaning that he like dies with iman in his heart, right? But how we can start to relate to the Quran, like through the prophetic biography, as one of the access points, and then to start think about like what some of this means. Last time people asked, are there texts, right, as people come in and out? So one of the main texts we were building kind of this off of is just called Muhammad, His Life Based on the Earliest Sources by Martin Lings. And it's like very short chapters that are pretty easily digestible. And that's something you can kind of read to kind of anchor yourself around. And then there's Miraj Mohyuddin wrote like a newer like kind of Seerah text. He calls it Revelation, and he wrote it like an academic textbook, do you know? So I'll pass around, but if you've studied pedagogically in the United States, for example, in the UK, It's written like a book that you would study from, right? He himself pulls from a lot of different texts that are on the prophetic biography. I could bring you a stack of books that are on the prophet in English that I have at home, but I think just as a starting point, you want to be able to engage in some way. This would be like a good book to get if you want to be able to just kind of think about it from various viewpoints, through the prism of how you learn if you've studied in institutions like the one we're sitting in right now. Do you know? So it's not something that pedagogically doesn't resonate in the same way. Does that make sense? Huh? Is this called Revelation? I'll pass them both around. Yeah. Miraj Mohyuddin. Do you want to just pass them around? Yeah. You can take a look if you want to write the name down or whatever. They're both in English. The Martin Lings is essentially a translation of some of the earlier or earliest like Seerah literature. And what Miraj does, Mohyuddin, is just kind of compile and pull from various texts. He has it like reviewed and edited by like contemporary religious scholars as well. It's a good English textbook on the Prophet's life. You can kind of keep up with. So the first revelation that we talked about, it said, Iqra, read. And the Prophet, he responds, Ma'ana biqari, that I'm not able to read. I'm not a reciter. And we talked about that in a lot of detail. One of the things you want to realize when we're engaging in pretty much most courses of study within Islam as a religion is you're going to find different opinions on a lot of things. The word for revelation is wahi. And there's now a period in the prophetic biography that's called Fatrat al-Wahi, a cessation of the wahi, that revelation stops. The reasons behind that we'll discuss in a bit. But some people say, Iqra, read, and the subsequent verses, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, to the end of those verses, read in the name of your Lord. That's like the first revelation, and then there's a stoppage of revelation for a period of time. Some would say days, some say weeks, some say 3 months, 6 months, some say a year. Most would say it's likely like in the month category and not like as long as a year. But some say it's even just a handful of days and even a week before there's another interaction with Angel Gabriel and another form of revelation. Others would say that there are other verses that are revealed along that first set of revealed verses before there's this cessation of verses. What you would have within it are the initial verses after this surah, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. There's a chapter of the Quran that's called Surah Al-Qalam. And I'd love for people to just pull it up on their phones, Arabic, English. So we are building a relationship with this as we're reading about this. So if you want to just Google, like Quran, Surah Qalam, I don't know what the surah number is. I can tell you though, I have a computer sitting in front of me. Surah Qalam is the 68th chapter of the Quran. So there's some people who would say that this is also within those first set of revealed verses that are coming before there's a cessation of revelation for some time. Can somebody read the first set of verses here that go until about verse 6, verse 7? You can read the English or the Arabic. Yeah, go ahead. That's good. Can somebody read the translation? Yeah, go ahead.
Noon, by the pen and what everyone writes. By the grace of your Lord, you, O Prophet, are not insane. You will certainly have a never-ending reward. You are truly a man of outstanding character. Soon you and the pagans will see which of you is mad.
So there's letters in a series of chapters in the Quran, sporadic throughout the Quran, that start with just verses that start just with a letter. And these would be understood as disjointed letters, letters that don't necessarily have a clear explanation to them. Haruf al-muqatta'at, they're called in Arabic, kind of just like the hanging letters, disjointed letters. So right now, you just have this word that is just a letter, noon. Do you know what I mean? And you want to think, like, if you're in conversation with somebody, and in the middle of the conversation, they just said to you, like, W, right? That's essentially what this is. There's not definitive reason as to why this is. Like, the meaning of it, we just don't know. Do you know? There's interpretations that people offer relevant to, for example, the Prophet saying, "Ma ana biqari," I'm not able to read. And now you have these verses, for example, that are including letters in them that essentially are giving the Prophet an indication of like letters and language, etc. Allah knows best, right? More so, there's not an interpretation really of this. But as you go through these verses, and we think about what we read when the Prophet ﷺ is talking to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and giving insight into what it is that he's experiencing, right? We said one of the more remarkable things that we pulled from the hadith is that he tells Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha that he's afraid, he's scared. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him. There's moments where he thinks he has lost his mind. He thinks that something is wrong with him. And what is this chapter saying in its initial set of verses, right? We just read the translation. What does it say?
That he's not insane.
It says you are not insane. Does it make sense? Quran is not a text that every verse just means like one thing. So you don't want to get to a place where when you read these verses, you are also saying it only is about this. The idea is that when you engage in traditional study of Quran, you're engaged in the study of various sciences relevant to Quran, including tafsir, which is the exegetical analysis. You're extrapolating meaning from the text. Most people cannot do this, right? That's a scholarly endeavor. What most people can do is not tafsir, but it's called tadabbur, that you're doing reflection on the Quran. You're contemplating its verses, and within that reflection, it's not in a vacuum, but the reflection is, what does this mean back to me? How does this apply to me? Does that make sense? Why I'm saying this is because as we contextualize what the verses are being revealed in and how we can see a relation to some of it, it doesn't mean that there's absolute interpretation, that one can't delve deeper into a lot of the Quran in terms of being able to recognize and understand its significance from various vantage points, right? Like an example that I like to give is I've sat with friends of mine, a Bengali guy, a black guy, and we're talking about different things, and the story of Musa alayhi salam, Moses, peace be upon him, comes up. And my friend who's African American says to my Bengali friend, we love the story of Moses in our family. Having been the grandchildren of enslaved individuals, the narrative of an emancipated population that is enslaved for centuries just resonates with us so differently. My Bengali friend says, I've never heard somebody talk about the story of Moses like this before. Do you get what I mean? Right? We can't say that there's only one way to talk or learn about that story. So here too, I don't want you, as we start to
touch the surface of some of these verses, then say, it only means this. Forget about doing a disservice to someone else you talk to. You're doing a disservice to yourself, because when you come and read Quran, there's always opportunity to engage it and take from it again and again and again, right? You read Fatiha 17 times a day. The idea is that there's got to be something it's doing for you, not only on a daily basis, but multiple times in a day, right? How does it resonate? How do I draw meaning from it? Do you know what I mean? Here, Allah is answering like some of these thoughts directly. And one of the more powerful verses that comes from this, that you hear from it again and again quoted when we talk about the Prophet's character, his biography, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. It says in the 4th verse of Surah Al-Qalam that indeed upon you is a magnificent character. In Arabic, when you have the word ala, it's a preposition. It means upon, right? But usually, when it's utilized, it is talking about something definitive, right? Upon the table, upon the computer, upon the chair. Character is not tangible the way this is tangible, right? Right? But the verse is saying the Prophet's character is so defined, it's like it's a tangible thing. And the way it's being qualified is azim. Like when we are taught to aspire towards character, we're taught to have husnul khuluq, like a beautiful character. In Arabic, when something is azim, it's just really grand. The Day of Judgment is described as azim. The Book of Allah is described as azim. Allah himself, in his infinite divine names and attributes, he's known as Al-Azim, right? The Prophet's character is defined in this way. Why do you think this verse attaches itself importantly at the onset of revelation, in this moment where the Prophet is also still trying to process what it is that he's going through? How does knowing or identifying like amazing character as something that's an important part here? Do you get what I mean? Because there's not anything without meaning in Allah's plan. Do you know? The Prophet is struggling right now. Like he's trying to still process and figure out what's going on. So why is this verse an important verse in relation to what's transpiring simultaneously? Does the question make sense? If you can turn the person next to you and just talk it out a little bit, right? That in the midst of this, Allah has affirmed that you're not insane, you have not lost your mind, and you have a great character. Does it make sense? So why? What does it make us think about in relation to some of what we're talking about? If you just talk to the people next to you for a few minutes so we can kind of get discussing, and then we'll come back and talk about it as well. But go ahead. Did you guys see this on this side?
Exactly. Okay, thanks, man. Okay. Okay, let's come back. So, what do we think? Like, how does this fit in? وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that indeed upon you is this magnificent character. What did you discuss? Yeah.
We talked a lot about like the power that like the revelation could hold, and like the trust that comes with power, and that like outstanding character would hopefully mean that like you wouldn't take advantage of the power given to you by housing this information, which is why you'd be like entrusted with it in the first place.
Yeah, amazing. Other thoughts? Yeah.
We were talking about how, like, when the prophet received this revelation, like, he was known among the people as, like, the person who never lies. Like, everyone regarded him as the person with the best character. And then after he tried to tell the people about the revelation, like, later on, they immediately turned their back on him. But here Allah is saying, like, no, you absolutely have the best of character, regardless of what people will say about you.
Yeah.
We were talking about how it also kind of insinuates that his character is a part of, like, the reason why he was chosen, the reason why he's the right person, the best person to hold this responsibility that he does. He was conscious that this isn't happening to you because something's going on with your mind. This is happening to you because you are the person who can be trusted, who can be relied on, who is going to take that initiative, etc.
Great. Other thoughts? We find, like, in a lot of this, and it's going to be a theme throughout the Seerah, the humanity of the Prophet is echoed again and again and again. It's critical in understanding because the divine aspects of the Quran are absolute. This is not a religion that deifies the Prophet of God in any which way, shape, or form. Think about when you're struggling and things are hard, and you're trying to make sense of why you're going through what you're going through. The number of people who sit in my office with me and things are just turned upside down. And as they're going through this process of trying to make sense of it, dissonance kicks in a lot. Do you know? Why did my dad hit me when I was little? And as the question pops up again and again, every answer is a Band-Aid. And now the young woman who's asking me at 20 years of age is dealing with the consequence of a last answer that brings closure but not reconciliation, that is rooted in self-blame. Maybe I did something to deserve this. When you have an understanding of the divine that is unconsciously formulated, think about the number of times life has been tough and immediately your mind goes to a certain place. You don't get something that you really want. Why can't I marry this person? I didn't get this job. This didn't work out. That didn't work out. And it translates automatically into, am I being punished for something? Did I do something wrong and this is what's happening consequently? And when you're at your lowest and things are really hard, what is it that needs to happen? What most of us get are solutions. We don't get validation or affirmation. The Prophet has already come off of a mountain and met with amazing support from Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. Waraka says to him that I wish I was a younger person, that I would be there for you when your people ridicule you and mock you and throw you out. It's important to understand that when Waraka is saying to the Prophet of God, they're going to do these things to you, the thing that gets the Prophet is, they're going to expel me from my homeland? He can't fundamentally understand, given the role he plays societally, how this could be a possible scenario. And he's still carrying all of this inside of him, trying to figure out. Think about when your world is turned upside down, the kind of spectrum of thoughts that you run through. And he thinks he's crazy. And not only is the closest people to him in a worldly sense saying, you're not, but Allah is also saying, you're not crazy. But what does he think he's crazy about? And when the thoughts become pervasive and you get exhausted and it just builds up again and again and again, you experience this yourself when life gets really heavy. You wonder why you do the things that you do in relation to the stress, the exhaustion, the trauma. And then how many people do you talk to when you're at your lowest and they try to help, but it's really not helpful? Like, maybe you should go do this. Maybe you should go and do that. And then you try those things and they don't work. Versus somebody says, it's going to be okay. I'm here with you. And in the midst of it, who's reminding you that you're a good person? Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, in the hadith that we looked at for the last couple of weeks. It's the third hadith in the book of Revelation in Sahih Bukhari, right? a chapter. It's not a book like the way you have a book of Exodus, etc., in other like religious texts. But hadith books are broken into chapter headings. There's a chapter on the revelation, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha narrates this hadith. We looked at it a lot, and in the midst of all of this, when the Prophet is struggling, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, what does she say to him? You honor the rights of guests. You remember the world's forgotten. He's affirming and reminding who he is. Allah is telling his messenger, you're a good man. All of the things that you say are applicable, like what each one of you said. It's applicable in the situation. Be mindful of your character as you go into this role. It's an important reminder right at the beginning, because when you get to a place of authority, right, it's usually people of authority, men of authority, who abuse power and authority, because you can't abuse power until you have power. He is going to be the last messenger to humanity, the last prophet ever sent. You are Muslim. There are 2 billion of you in the world right now. You also can draw from this a recognition that none of this is preconceived. The emotionality of it just determines the raw feeling that he didn't know that this was going to happen. And his world is thrown upside down. There's no room for somebody to say, you're a charlatan, you are a scammer, you're doing this, you're doing that, because the reactions in these modes of existence are just what one would be engaged in when they're in a deeply difficult, traumatic experience. But the affirmation is coming from the revelation. Remember who you are. That's what needs to happen when you get thrown off sometimes. There's a tribe, I can't remember the name of the tribe in Africa, but I'll try to remember. When you're born as a child, they give you a song that's your unique song. And the way that that song comes into play, relevant to what we're talking about, as somebody grows in age, and then things get thrown off. They behave contrary to the way that we know them to behave. They make decisions that are kind of off kind of the path that they normally are. They're not being themselves. This entire tribe then gathers around the person and sings the song that was given to them as a young person to help them remember who they're supposed to be and not go in the direction that they're in. Do you get what I mean? My son yesterday, Kareem, mashallah, big dua for him. He's a great kid. I love him to death. Just like I love his daughter. His daughter. He better not have a daughter. I love my daughter, Medina, his sister. He woke up in a bad mood, man. I don't even know what was going on. He came out of his bedroom. He like sat down next to me on the couch, and it was not good. And so he's talking to me. We're like snuggling. He's got this like soft blanket around him, and then he gets up. He goes into his sister's room, and then all of a sudden I hear, "Ah!" I'm like, "Oh my God, what is going on?" And then he comes out, and I'm like, "What's happening?" And then a mile a minute, like, hold on a second. And then they are now passing negativity one to the next. It's just contagious. It's going back and forth, and then he is standing, like, making his case for I don't even know what. I was like, come sit here, man. And then I held him close to me. The tears start coming out. And I said, this is not who you are. Are you okay? Like, what's happening? He's only 8 years old. Like, what kind of answer is he going to give to me? So he's like, I don't know, Baba. I'm like, are you tired, man? You want to go lie down? And he said, yes. And 5 minutes later, I called him from my couch. If any of you have been to our apartment, many of you have. The rest of you haven't. You should come over. And so I called him from the couch in our living room. I was like, Kareem, are you sleeping? He's like, no. And then he walked out again, and he sat next to me, and I held him some more. And I said, are you doing okay? He didn't know what to say. I said, you don't have to say anything. And then after a little bit of time, I said, try to eat something, right? Maybe he's just like a hangry person right now. He got some food in him, and he calmed down a little bit. I could have told my son, hey, maybe you shouldn't eat sugar so much. Or why do you not sleep like at the hours you're supposed to? Or it's not good that you're yelling at your sister. Or look at how you're ruining everybody's start to the day. Or am I going to help him remember like who he is? Do you get what I mean? And you know why I'm going to do that? Because I love him so much, I'm willing to carry the pain or negativity he has without first calling him out on it before I'm a support to him. Do you get what I mean? Allah loves the Prophet, and Allah loves you. In recognizing here, none of these people have said to the Prophet of God, why are you spending so much time out in the mountains? Why are you sitting in these caves? Maybe that's why you're having these like visions and hallucinating. They're just affirming again and again, you're a good person, you're a good person, you're a good person. They're helping him to remember who he is. When you get thrown off and things are heavy, quite often you forget who you are. The mind can go in a lot of different directions when you exist in cycles of shame, self-blame that is unhealthy, which is different from accountability. I still sat my son down later and I was like, hey man, you could feel whatever you're feeling. You better not talk to your sister like this ever again. Right? We're not going to pretend like that didn't happen. Do you get what I mean? But he's got to be in a place where he's ready to receive it also. And so in understanding here, in real time, this is getting given to the prophet in this first part of this first revelation. Another set of verses that they say also there's opinions is included in this is the first set of verses of Surah Al-Muzammil, which is chapter number 73. Can people pull that open also? Quran chapter number 73, Al-Muzammil. It's called Al-Muzammil, right? This is one of the nicknames given to the Prophet. And when we looked at the hadith last week and the week before of Aisha, where this depiction of revelation for the first time is being given, when the Prophet is shivering out of shock, he's so scared. He walks into his house. He's in Arabia. He's not in New York City in 10 degrees. He's in the Arabian desert, right? And so he walks in, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, cover me, right? So you can hear the letters, Muzammil, Zammiluni, right? So this is what this chapter is now referencing. Can somebody read the first few verses of this? Chapter 73. Yeah, go ahead.
How many ayahs do you want to go?
Just the first handful is fine.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا.
That's okay. That's good. Jazakallah khair. Somebody want to read the translation? Yeah, go ahead.
O you wrapped in your clothes, stand all night in prayer except a little. Pray half the night or a little less, or a little more, and recite the Quran properly in a measured way. For we will soon send upon you a weighty revelation. Indeed, worship in the night is more impactful and suitable for recitation.
Great. So here we had like the first handful and translation a little bit more. But it's also now in the midst of it,
an opportunity to find like a coping mechanism, an outlet. Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla ila qalila. That, oh, one who is covered up, right? Like Allah sees you. Do you know what I mean? How much do you go through when you're in moments of difficulty and you just wish somebody noticed what you were going through? Somebody recognized, like, hey, I'm not doing so well. And so there's endearment here, relevant to the Prophet in this moment. But the outlet that's given to him, that is something that he engages in a prophetic practice throughout now his prophethood, is standing in the night to pray. Why do you think this is given to him at this time? It's a very important thing, because it also can help frame for us what the purpose is of ritual quite often. So here, you stand in the night, even for a bit. How does this play a role in what the Prophet is going through right now? If you can just talk to the people around you, right? Like, what's the relevance of this? How does this become Allah could have given the Prophet any advice, right? You're a good man, Surah Qalam says. You have a beautiful character. And now, stand in the night to pray. Why? Because he's still riled, he's still trying to figure out what's going on. What does this do for him? Why is this like a mechanism he's given, right? If you can just turn to the persons next to you for a bit, talk it out, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Oh yeah, I was looking at it.
Sometimes you're like, oh, all they know is Surah, we know several surahs. What's like,
It's also like one of the very first things. Pray and in fact
Okay. Oh, never mind. Did you guys pass it around over?
We didn't get to it.
Oh yeah. Good. Can you pass it around? Okay. So what do we think? Why is this something that's being given to the prophet right now? Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla ila qalila. Yeah.
So as everything, I kind of try and look at it and relate it to my life, and I just think about, like, if I'm dealing with stress, if I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling like I'm losing it. You know, we have our 5 daily prayers that we do, but we have a period from 12 hours plus or minus. We are not immersed in Allah. We're not receiving His gifts through worship. And standing in the middle of the night can bring us that ease from this 12-hour period to fully, to spend more time with Allah, to allow us to center ourselves, to be aligned spiritually with Allah, so that the things of the nafs, the anxiety, the stress, the fear, these would be things of the nafs, that we can quote unquote eliminate them or alter them into a positive through God's energy and through God's alignment. So standing through the night, praying in that 12-hour period of time where we typically pray or not, we're allowing ourselves to bathe more in the divine energy than we do simply by doing the 5 daily prayers. That's the way I consider it.
Great. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I was saying, like, during the night, it's kind of like a vulnerable time because you're kind of alone, like, a lot of people are sleeping, and you, like, get up to kind of pray to God. You're very, like, vulnerable and, like, opening yourself up to Allah, and I think that just is, like, a way to kind of build a deeper connection and find solace.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I was just thinking tangibly, it's just more quiet. Like there's less distractions. There's an inherent solitude that is just in the night.
Yeah. Anything else? Yep.
You know, like there's a saying that that you cannot just choose to pray tahajjud, like, and Allah chooses you, or He's like the most closest servant to pray tahajjud, right? So I feel like it's like it can be used like a metaphor that only the Prophet is like awake at night, so he's the chosen one over all the other people who are sleeping at the most blessed time of the entire 24 hours.
Okay.
Direct concept.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
I was just saying that, like, what everyone else pretty much said, so it's like, since it's quiet, it's dark also, so now you really have time to focus in on yourself and Most High also, and like, since he's the chosen one, it's more like a direct contact. So as he's praying his thoughts out and anxieties and all that, he's actually getting spoken to directly.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
I was thinking how, like, since this is part of like the very beginning of Revelation, one of like the first things that he tells the prophet to do, so 7, is to pray at night, because he's like very immediately giving him a tool, which is just going to be something that he's going to do like indefinitely, but it's going to be something that helps him throughout his time as a prophet, because like people were saying, it's a time where there's no distractions and like you can really just focus on getting closer to him.
Yeah. And what does the 5th verse say that we read the translation of? I don't know if we read the Arabic of it. I'm getting old. Yeah.
For we will soon send upon you a holy revelation. And that actually to that end as well, and to mention as well, I was looking at that verse, and indeed, worship in the night is more impactful and suitable for recitation. And I was thinking about how, kind of along the lines of what you said, it's kind of a time for processing. Because like you mentioned, this experience is kind of akin to, in a lot of ways, processing a heavy trauma, processing all of the things he's experiencing alone, and that nobody else is. There's nobody to support him in really in that way, except for Allah, and he has that private time away from like away from his responsibilities in a sense. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever heard the phrase like you can't like heal in the environment that harmed you or whatever, in the sense that during the day, as Allah Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is he is the strong one and he is the person everybody is relying on. And then at night when he's alone, as we said, is the time when he can kind of just shed that for some time.
Yeah. So most people, when they come and they're talking about stuff, guys, when people come in, can you just ask them to pray in the front so they're not blocking the door? Yeah. When you go through like difficulty, do you know what I mean? That you've never experienced before, right? Say you know someone in your life who has been complete vegetarian, vegan their entire life. And after 20, 30 years of living, they are then forced to eat like some meat, you know? What's going to happen, very likely, is they're going to throw it all up. Not because they're disgusted by the idea of eating it, but their body literally doesn't produce the enzymes to break it down. It's just non-existent. They've never eaten this thing before. So their consumption of something that is foreign to their being is now responded in this way where the defense mechanisms inside are looking to just expel it. You get what I mean? When you consume emotions, it's not different. If you're in a place where you have never felt a certain type of feeling before, your mind, your body, your heart, your spirit, it's still looking to figure out a way to reconcile and push it out, to get you to a place of homeostasis. When we're agitated like this, we quite often just look to our most innate coping mechanisms to get back to here. If they work, amazing. But when it's brand new, it's probably not going to work. What most people do then is one of a few things. They just keep trying the same thing. It doesn't work. They get more frustrated. Their inside feels a little more broken. Or they sit here and say, there's no way out of this. And that just creates more agitation. Or they look for a new coping mechanism, right? Because we have maturation in ourselves. You don't eat the same food as when you were 2 years old, right? You don't wear the same clothes when you're 2 years old. You have physical maturation organically, emotional, mental maturation also. Your ability to understand and comprehend is different now than when you were 2 or 5 or 7. Spiritual maturation also necessitates sometimes things having fluctuation, but they have to be more deliberate. The Prophet is going through something heavy, unlike anything he's ever experienced. And who else in the world exists at this time? There's no other prophets than him at that time. The closest prophet to him came 600 years prior, right? Because AD is what in our Gregorian calendar? It's after death of who? Like BC is before Christ. Do you get what I mean? So the relevancy of it is something that creates also a very unique sense of responsibility. So who's going to fundamentally understand what this is about? To be a prophet of God. And as he's digesting all of it, the outlet that's given to him to render softness in the heart, قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَىٰ قَلِيلًا, stand in the night, even if just a little bit. Maybe half of the night, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. But do it and recite the Quran within that time. These are sources of healing. The Quran as a text is very conscious of itself. It tells you in its first couple of pages that it's a book. It knows that it's a book. And when it's described as a guidance, it's described as a mercy, it's also described as shifa, a healing. In the sense of physical, but also like emotional, spiritual, mental healings. So the intentionality that's given through this mechanism of divine connection is one about both the healing of oneself, the ability to bring strength
to then process, right? That's the point of the outlet. The outlet is not what then processes, but as you engage in the outlet, you bring yourself back to homeostasis so you can make sense of it. And then it says, we're going to send you like even more of this. It's going to be heavy. So the heart has to be ready to hold all of it. Because revelation, the experience of it, is not the easiest thing. The mechanism through which you ready yourself for the heaviness of the day is to utilize the nights in the ways that they're intended. Most things in creation get thrown off in how they live in their natural course of existence because humans don't live in the ways that we should be living. Right? Birds, they just are birds. But when you see a bird like in Washington Square Park eating a hot dog, that's not because the bird was like, man, I really want a hot dog today. It's because some fool of a human was like, how funny would it be? I'm going to give this bird a hot dog, right? It's crazy. Do you know what I mean? This also can be applied inward. It makes no sense, work-life balance in the society we live in. When the day is so fundamentally exhausting, spaces are non-existent to express heaviness that we have inside. There's an equal sign between who I am and what I do professionally. Then you get to a place where we live in the middle of Manhattan, right? Our center. We're not like out in the middle of someplace else. You walk that way at nighttime, the world is so different from how the rest of the world is. And that's not hating on anybody, but that's just a reality. We used to rent a church on 6th Avenue before this building was built, alhamdulillah, and we were in the basement of the church on 6th Ave in the West Village. 3 blocks away, it's like a different world. All these tattoo parlors, adult stores, right? Some of the guys that work in these places are Muslim. A lot of them would come to Jummah. There was times at Jummah, I'd be standing near the door, and people would walk in, crack pipes would fall on the ground. I had to grab it, and then these kids who come here who are like sheltered, maybe is a good word. I don't know. What's that thing, Khalid? It's like, oh, it's nothing, you know? But that's not necessarily going to be the case in a lot of Muslim spaces. We choose to live here, and there's still benefit to us being here, but there's a reality that if we want to have an understanding of the microcosm of how so much of society functions, because what they do during the day, they have to engage in practice to numb, not to heal, but just numb so they don't feel what the rest of the week is going to go, right? I dread that it's Monday. The Prophet fasted on Monday because he was happy it was Monday. I was born on Monday. Revelation comes on a Monday. You wake up on a Monday, and you can't wait until it's Friday. And in between, they have learned how to sell you things to make more money, to give you complacency instead of contentment. Allah is saying, don't use the nights like that. Use the nights in a way that ready you for what the day is going to bring upon you coming forth. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. There's a paradox to the nights in our tradition that when they get to their darkest of shades, they create the opportunity for the most luminosity inwardly. So your light increases more inside as it gets darker outside. You just think about what you do most of your nights. And most of it's not even in the engagement of things that make no sense. Some of it's just like, just go to sleep earlier. I have to stay up late at night because I got to do these things. I got to catch up on like what I missed. No, man, no, you don't. Like you're not going to do work at work anyway. Just wait till you get to work and open your phone and start looking at what you're looking at. Do you know what I mean? But once in a while, see how the spiritual act is meant to be a source of healing, not just burdensome obligation. The Hajj prayers are fard upon the Prophet of God. In the onset of Muslim experience, the companions were also required to use the nights in this way. And then the obligation gets lifted from them. But the beginning period of revelation in Mecca, which we're going to talk about in the coming month, it was real hell for people. They were not in the favor of power towards them. They were weak and oppressed. A lot of persecution, a lot of difficulty, boycotts, abuse. They were murdered, killed. And so the idea with us here is to recognize also that a lot of these things that we do, we're actually taught through our texts what the point of it is. When you pray like extra prayers beyond the obligations, the hadith says this is meant to cultivate love. If you don't do the thing that then yields the thing that can only be done by doing the thing, then how would you get the thing at the end of it? So you want the love that can come from observing what is nafila, then you do what's nafil in order to then have that love. If you don't do it, then it's not going to happen. You can't benefit from fasting if you don't fast. Just like you can't benefit from volunteering, giving in charity, working at a soup kitchen, visiting the sick. It doesn't mean sadness won't happen, but what sadness does to you will be different because what's happening inside is being taken care of. What do you do for your heart during the course of anything? And what's the prophet getting in instruction at the beginning of his revelation relationship with God? Character is important, and make sure that you're taking care of your heart by standing at night, even just for a little bit. You get what I mean? These are now what many would say are in that first grouping. Iqra, read. These verses of Surah Al-Qalam, you're not crazy, you have a good character. And O Muzammil, stand in the night, even just for a little bit. The shifts that come because we take religion from people who don't have the character that the Prophet were taught about in these verses. Most people turn away from religion because of religious people. You got to unlearn some of what you hold in relation and not see obligation as burden, but as a mechanism of rendering benefit and inward rest. Aspirations towards contentment find healing through these practices. And then you just build a relationship with it. So if you have difficulty in waking up to go to work, you probably aren't going to wake up at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning every night. Be reasonable with yourself. Start with your 5 daily prayers. They're a gift. They're not meant to be a burden. Wherever you're at, do your best to honor the time in which that window is given to you, the entirety of the window. Add to it, like the sunnahs, the nafil, the extra prayers, when you can. And if you can't, you just do what it is that you can do, because you're not worshiping the feeling of a prayer, right? The prayer in and of itself is the spiritual exercise. And this is where discipline comes in. You do it not because it's convenient or it feels good, but you do it because you know there's still benefit in it, regardless of what the feeling is at the end of all of it. After this period, there's a pause. And that pause in revelation, the prophet now is in a place where he starts to go back to where he gets the initial revelation. Why do you think there's a pause? The different opinions on this, days, weeks, months, 3 months, 6 months, up to a year, Allah knows best. That's just how some of this is, right? It's a historical record that doesn't have everything definitively outlined, because who would be outlining it from amongst the people that even know about what's going on right now? Waraka is dead at this point, right? Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha knows, but she also will pass at a relatively recent stage, not like super close. She goes through a lot with the Prophet, but there's not a lot of people, and they're trying to figure out what this thing is. So they're not like, hold on, we got to document every single part of this. It's more of a testament to the reality of all of this, that all of it isn't just defined like in concrete terms, because that would probably be more historically unlikely. Do you get what I mean? So this period happens that is a major period in the prophetic biography where revelation stops for some time. In this time, the prophet goes back to some of these mountains. He's like trying to recreate the moment. What do you think is going on here now? Why is there a pause? Like, why does Allah do this, do you think? And why is the prophet going back? He was freaked out from everything that happened. How do the two have like relation to each other? You just talk to the people around you for a bit about why this might be transpiring in this way. What is like the purpose of this? Why is God doing this to the prophet in this way? And why is the prophet now going back to the place of this difficult experience to engage in it? Whether it was days or weeks, but likely it's in like the few months like time span, right? So what are some of the things that come up for you with that realization? And then we'll go back and talk about the second revelation that comes, right? There's no like surprises here. Do you know what I mean? You literally have Qur'ans on your phones. So you know the whole thing is going to come down, right? So we know like it's going to start again at some point. You know what I mean? So think about that as you engage in this conversation. It's not a surprise, like, oh man, is it going to happen again? No, like you know it's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? So why do you think there was this break for that period of time, right? What's it like doing? Because preparation for prophethood doesn't mean that there's also still not preparation for other stuff. So what's the pause about, and why is the reaction from the prophet that he's now going back to like the places where it came, like trying to experience this again? Do you get what I mean? So you can talk for a few minutes, then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
I got these like a couple months ago, and my friend was like, "I'm trying to like these are good songs." Yeah, I keep them. These are the running ones. They're a bit thinner. I just want so like, but also I needed socks that was like very sensitive to like my feet. And like, I tried the thicker ones, they were just like a bit too much. So I just need something a bit thinner, but these are very good. Yeah, Seerah.
Less for fasting hours. It's not easy. Yeah. You know, right now,
I almost wonder, like, this really just plays some kind of problem about the human, part of our human nature is also insecurity and like fear of abandonment. It's like the revelations just stop for days or weeks. Is there like are you still there?
Okay, so what do we think? Why is there this pause? Why is the prophet going back to just recreate the moment, so to speak? Why is there a pause? Maybe we can start for that. What did you discuss? Yeah.
This was all a new experience to the prophet, peace be upon him. So I think like anything, if we were to sit down and read the Quran in one sitting with someone who's never experienced it, you need time to process it, you need time to absorb it, you need time to meditate upon it. Think and contemplate what are these words, and at the same point in time with the night prayers, coming to ease himself to in essence, this pause is a preparation for Ba'alah to prepare the prophet, peace be upon him, for the next segment of the revelation. And perhaps his going back to the cave is a lesson in itself for us to understand that we can't really truly recreate any experience from the past. We can only move forward on to the future and use that past experience in this context. You know, the verses of the Quran that the prophet, peace be upon him, receives, to contemplate on that, to get him prepared for that next stage, just as we have, you know, Islam 101, Islam 102, and so on and so forth within any college. Of course, you can't get to the end without doing the start and taking time to learn. If you were to give your entire semester in one sitting, you wouldn't retain that information. See it as that way.
Great. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Think about just the pause being a physical recovery, right? Talking about the squeeze, right? And any sort of like traumatic experience, like it takes a toll on like the body and the mind, and like needing time to process, but also just recover. And so I think that
Other thoughts? Yeah, so think about this, right? He still has a family. We said from 25 to 35, there's not any major events recorded in the Seerah literature because he's still just taking care of his family at this time. Do you know? So think about when you have difficult stuff going on in your life. If we had the privilege of not having to go to work when life was tough, if we had the privilege of not having to like still take care of responsibilities, do you know what I mean? Sometimes you have to. Like sometimes it's important to take that sick day or take off like for a week because you need that moment of rest, but there's a balance that goes into it. So the pause in and of itself, there can be numerous understandings as to what's there. Both the idea of creating that healing and the recovery as you're going through something, right? Like if you've lost a loved one in your life, you know, I'm sorry for the experience, but how you feel about it today doesn't mean you're not sad, but it's likely very different from when you first experienced it in that hour immediately after, the day, the week after, you know? There's a process through which that balance restores itself, both organically or if you have self-care strategies
and a sense of self that allows for you to have emotional intelligence enough to say, I don't know everything about myself, and you're open to new coping mechanisms, you get back to more of a place of stability over time, right? What if a revelation came one day, every day, for like the rest of all of his life, and he had to go through this experience again and again and again? Do you know what I mean? The words don't match up. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that you have a beautiful character, right? يَا أَيُّهَا الْمُزَمِّلِ, right? There's endearment that's here. Do you know? I see you, the person covered in a blanket, you know? And then I'm going to also like ruin your life every day. You know what I'm saying? So where it doesn't make sense, love can't be a justification for things that don't make sense. Do you know? So when we sit with adults who clearly had like childhoods that didn't make sense, I can't tell my kid that because I love him, it's okay for me to mistreat him. Like, it doesn't make sense. Do you see what I mean? So there has to be a sense that demonstrates to us also through all of this, what is God's relationship to his messenger? And he's telling him, like, this is going to be heavy. This Quran you're going to reveal. This is not going to be like an easy experience. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not. But sometimes that's just what's necessary. You got to go through heaviness in order for what needs to be achieved to be achieved. The element of love still has to have understanding to it, fundamentally. And then the pause also, as you like recenter yourself and you process, there starts to be like a yearning for this. Have you ever met somebody who's super excited to be a mom or a dad? They find out and they're just joyous. And have you ever saw someone who clearly, when they find out, they're like, I don't want any part of this. And you can see the difference quite often between parents who you know want to spend time with their kids and parents who they love when their kids spend time with other people. Do you know what I mean? Right? It's hard to be a dad if from the beginning you don't want to be a dad. It's hard to be a mom if you do not want to be a mom. You can apply it also to other things. If you don't shift paradigms sometimes, your job is going to suck because you think of yourself only through your job. If you can reevaluate sometimes and say, my identity is not just this is the means through which I get my sustenance, and then I'm still something outside of my work hours. It's not for everybody, but it's for some of us. What if the prophet did not want to be the prophet, but he still had to be it? What would that be like? Do you get what I mean? Sometimes you just have to deal with it. You're the racist parent that doesn't want your kid to marry someone from a different culture. Get over it. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the recognition that the prophet has to also want to do what's about to happen, because it's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. He's going to see his friends and family members get hurt because of what he's teaching them. 23 years is a long period of time. I'm 41 years old. I've worked here since I was 22. When you can get to a place where you can measure things in decades, it just becomes a very different experience. So in being able to understand why it's important to create a relationship to the experience, because we talked a few weeks ago about the modes through which wahi comes. It's a literal heavy experience. And then after the fact, the responsibility of sharing a message, of teaching and preaching. And then it's not in a vacuum. He's not just the teacher. He doesn't just come and sit and lecture and leave. He's got to also be the counselor. He's got to also be the strategist on a battlefield. He's still a family man. He's not able to do any of this by taking charity in any form. The Quran literally is telling him that these people need to see that you are not benefiting financially, monetarily from the propagation of this message. So there's no sadaqah, no zakat that goes to the Prophet. You can give him a gift if you want to, but he's not taking a percentage of any form of what's coming in terms of charitable contributions. So you got to only do it because you know that it's something you both have to do. And it's a lot easier when you can let yourself feel like you want to do it too. Do you get what I mean? What would 23 years feel like if it was just a drag? And every day, I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't have to do this. He's doing this as he smiles at people that he greets. He's doing this as he still takes the time to ask children how they are after their baby pet birds die. If you do not take moments to pause and rest in your life, why would you not feel the way that you feel constantly? Do you get what I mean? When I talk to people about self-care, a lot of people listen. There's one lady, she did not want to hear it. She was much older than me. I was a little younger than I am right now. She was telling me about some man she wanted to get married to, that her family would not have it, different cultures, different this, different that. She's sitting in my office, older than me. I'm talking to her like, I can't make your decisions. Like, I don't know you. I don't know the guy. That guy could be a fool. How could I say you should go marry? I don't know, right? But she's asking, how do I make choices? And I'm saying, well, the state that you're in when you make a choice is arguably more important than the choice. If you make it in anxiety, you're going to leave the door open to look back with regret. You make it with confidence, then you have accountability towards your choice. I'm talking about self-care outlets. And she interrupts, a little upset. I'm a consultant. I'm going to be on a plane in 3 different time zones before I fly out of the country on my vacation to my family, who are in another time zone across the sea. I'm going to be so exhausted when I'm there. How can I do this? I said, look, man, it's not my marriage. And if it's not important enough to you to take some time off from work to just replenish, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. Do you get what I'm saying? So if you are not bringing rest into your life, sometimes that's your choice. Do you understand? The prophet of God, who is sent as the last prophet to all of humanity with a final testament, he needs moments also to breathe. When are you doing this? And it's an important thing to understand as you deepen in your own sense of self and you grow. My 8-year-old needed a moment to breathe when he was a little bit other than who he is. I'm not a good husband if I don't also understand that mother's guilt is a real thing, that a lot of moms just for years of their life just live in a mode of sacrifice. It makes complete sense that there's hadith that say Jannah, heaven, is at the feet of the mother. When you have a good mom, she's not going to do anything for herself for a while. That's why you got to also know, I need a pause for me, so she needs pauses too. These other people in my life, they sometimes need a break. Sometimes the break has to be from me, right? It's not going to be something you give readily or teach people about if you're not doing it for yourself. Do you know? So the pause creates the opportunity also for the reconciliation that allows for the heart now to be attached to what it is that's about to transpire. And that's sometimes what's necessary so you can reevaluate, and what became the source of trauma is now also the source of benefit. Because he's still going to have the revelation coming down to him. How did it suddenly become something that he's more equipped to handle? Do you get what I'm saying? Don't back away from it just when the first time hits you. You can't be ready to experience something out of the blue that you've never experienced before. You give yourself some space and then you reevaluate it. Maybe I am built to take this thing on. Maybe I do have the capacity. I don't have to give in. It's hard to get up for Fajr today. I will get up, inshallah, one day. It's hard to fast in Ramadan. I've never done it before. I'm going to get to a place where I will fast. I didn't pray my 5 daily prayers for most of the time from my 12 to my late teens. I'm on point with my prayers at this point in my life. Good for you that I do that. And I'm not somebody who skips on it. Otherwise, we'd be a mess of an Islamic Center. But I don't have to hate on my 12-year-old, 13-year-old self. I can celebrate the achievement that I was able to overcome and build a relationship and now have a want to actually pray my prayers. And that can't come unless I also came from where I came from. Do you get what I mean? The pauses are important. The rest is important. There's a hadith that's the next hadith after the one we looked at for the last 2 weeks, and this will be the last thing we look at tonight. So if you go back to that text, the Sahih Bukhari, the book of Revelation, the chapter on Revelation, hadith number 3 was the one that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, may God be pleased with her, narrates about what the Prophet experienced in his first revelation, right? The next hadith under that is by a companion by the name of Jabir ibn Abdullah, who is an Ansari man, right? Why is this important? The Ansar are the people of Medina. So this man, who's a man of Medina, which is a decade and some change later, is the one that's talking about what's happening in the early parts of Revelation. You want to be able to contextualize these people the same way on Monday when we go through the small book of hadith, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, we talk about the companion to be able to understand who they are and how that helps us inform and extrapolate more meanings from these things. If somebody can pull up this hadith, Jabir ibn Abdullah, talking about the period of the pause in Revelation. Do you see it in front of you? Anybody? Can you read it for us?
Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah Ansari, speaking about the speech of the Prophet. While I was walking, all of a sudden I heard a voice from the sky. I looked up and I saw the same angel who had visited me at the cave of Hira sitting on a chair between the sky and the earth. I got afraid of him and came back home and said, "Wrap me in blankets." And then Allah revealed the following holy verses of Quran. "O you Muhammad, wrapped up in garments, arise and warn the people against Allah's punishment up to and desert the idols." Verses 1 through 5. So it was on there. After this, the revelation started coming strongly, frequently, and regularly.
Great. So if we can pull up this chapter 74, it's called Al-Mudaththir. And if you read the Arabic of this hadith, this is where the Prophet again is going back to his house, right? It happened the first time, and now the second time. So we contextualize the hadith. The Prophet all of a sudden is walking, and in the horizons, he sees the angel Gabriel sitting on a chair. The authority of the angel is being demonstrated. He still doesn't know what's going on. Do you know what I mean? Nobody in between has been like, this is the angel Gabriel, it's coming from Allah, all these things. He looks into the horizon. When you hear somebody call you, right? If I said, Sam, you know what I mean? You're going to look here. If I'm not here, you're going to look around you, right? Nobody is thinking that the voice that's calling me is coming from up here, right? You know what I'm saying? Like if I said Amanda, and then I was just hanging from the ceiling talking to you, how? Is that a thing? It's not in like that frame of engagement that we're typically socialized with. And so he looks up and the angel is above him. And he says again, which is remarkable, right? And this is happening in Medina. This man, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, in Medina, the Prophet is narrating after his city has been established. He's still telling people, I was afraid. There's no dishonor in his vulnerability. There's just beauty and sincerity. He doesn't have to relive the moment a decade and a half later, leaving out key parts to it, to say in remembrance now, like different, right? This is why writing stuff down is great, because it gives you an accurate record of who you are today. So a month from now, you're not like, oh yeah, I actually wasn't as scared as I thought I was going to be, right? It wasn't really so bad. That angel popped out of nowhere. Yeah, it was fine, right? He said, no, I was afraid, right? The humanness is remarkable. And then he was afraid. What did he do? He went back to his house again. And now he's saying to his wife, Datharuni, Datharuni, cover me, cover me. It's different from Zammiluni, Zammiluni, like cloak me, right? But the same thing. And then chapter 74, Surah Mudathir, right? Datharuni, Mudathir, right? Zammiluni, Muzammil. You can hear like the common root letters in the words, right? So this is revealed. Can somebody read these first 5 verses? Surah Mudathir, chapter 74. Does anybody have it? We looked at each other's eyes. Now you gotta read it.
Okay, 74, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you covered up in your clothes, arise and warn all. Reveal your Lord alone. Purify your garments. Continue to shun idols. Do not a favor expecting more in return.
You could stop there. So here, Ya ayyuhal mudaththir, the Prophet is now with this blanket on him, right? Qum fa'anzir. Like, get up. Get up from like where you're crouched and seated, right? The verses are going to give a lot of insight, but they also create now a process. Some people, as we said, have different opinions on the orders of the revelation and what came what. So Iqra, everybody says, is the first. Then some people will say Surah Muzammil and Mudathir could potentially be the second or the third. They don't necessarily include Surah Qalam in that first set. Allah knows best. But even if we look at these verses all together, read, like acquire knowledge, have some regularity in learning something, and then the 2 steps that come after, Qum fa'andir, stand and warn. So you get something, like share it with people. You don't have to be annoying and in people's faces, but it gives you an idea. The warning is coming during the day, right? You're going to be out there and it's going to come at you. And so what do you do then? Qum al-layla ila qalila, like stand in the night for a little bit, right? So there's replenishment. You're rejuvenating, and then you go and you get up and do what you're supposed to do. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, that you're going to make your Lord like what is magnified. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. It's really beautiful because it's not just wear some clean clothes, which is important, right? You're the prophet of God. You're not going to show up like in a place that is not recognizing the station that you're in. Do you get what I mean? I can't come to Jummah and stand on the pulpit in a pair of short shorts and a tank top. None of you would take me seriously, So make sure that the clothes are literally clean. But there's also a lot that gets unpacked from this verse. And these are instructions coming right at the onset. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ is also in the metaphorical sense of cleanliness, right? Purity. But one of the most beautiful interpretations of this verse is that make sure the supply chain of what you're wearing only has what is pure to it. Don't be walking around in anything that's coming from sweatshops. Don't have products that you're carrying that are rooted in violation of labor rights. Like, you shouldn't be wearing, O messenger of God, something that required somebody else to live inhumanely. An animal had to be mistreated. Do you get what I mean? Make sure your clothes are pure inside and out. Everything now is about something that prior to people knew, but the level of trust is going to get amplified. So I might wear something that looks great, but if a baby had to die in a collapsed factory in Bangladesh for it, like, what am I going to do when I stand in front of God? Do you get what I mean? Who cares how nice your outside looks? It's telling you about your inside if you're not mindful that everything is around you in a way that doesn't center you, but you're going to glorify and revere your Lord. It's not egocentricity, it's God-centric. So a starting point in this is like, you understand that it's got to be just from good in every sense of the word. Do you know what I mean? وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, that you're going to be in a place where you got to bring it in that way too. The supply chain, every part of it has to be one where there's honor and dignity that's given, right? You continue to shun these idols, you stay away from them. And then from here now, there's public recognition of it. قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ, you got to get ready to start calling people to this thing. The Prophet already has heard from Waraka that your people are going to throw you out. He's had like the realities that he has. The ability of agency is still given to him. He's a person. What is he made of that he's still going to move forward now for the next 13 years in this Meccan society that literally is going to kick him out? We know it, right? This is why I'm saying it's not a surprise. We know what's going to happen. There's a reason why Medina gets established, because they weren't letting him be in Mecca. So he does get kicked out. And all the stuff that's coming after that are things that are going to be heavy. And the hadith, it ends, after this, the revelation comes strongly, more frequently, with regularity. So the heart's just got to keep up with it. And all the other stuff keeps going too. What I'd like you to do is for 2 minutes, turn to the persons next to you. What are some of the things you're taking away from tonight's conversation? And then we'll come back and wrap up, inshallah. Go ahead.
That was done.
Satisfaction is like, yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the things we're taking away from today? Maybe we get a few people and then we'll close up. Anybody? Yeah.
I think this is related to this week as well as last week, how we kind of, especially in America, we center ourselves around a lot of these like capitalist ideals, and you were kind of speaking about how if we don't, focus on these institutions that really are to bring us down, and focus instead on what Allah has asked of us, it'll help us in these things like with anxiety and guilt and regret, and how we should take time for ourselves instead of just thinking about this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do. And I feel like it's really important, especially for us as young people. Like, we're in this social media centered world where affluence seems so like easily accessible, and we just continue to try for it, but in reality it doesn't really come as easy as we think it does. So instead we should focus on the things that are more important, like what Allah has asked of us.
Great. Other thoughts? Anything we're taking away from today? Yeah.
Life is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Slow down, absorb, learn, understand, question again.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I've been a little bit struggling with prayer recently. I haven't had that problem for a long time. So out of nowhere, it came in, I cannot pray my Isha, for example. Just whatever happens, I have to create something or whatever. So just by talk, kind of it became like a ritual for me. Okay, I have to do it because I'll take a break from that, and then I'll just go and pray and then come back. So instead of doing that, that prayer is like a source of healing for me. So or like a source of escape. So that's just help me reconnect it better, concentrating on my prayer as well.
Great. Alhamdulillah. So a couple of things I'd suggest before we meet next week. Try to look at these verses, spend some time with them, think about how they're speaking to something in real time, but how do they relate back to me? We're going to look at movement now from here in terms of what's a public call look like
in the onset, because the prophet's never done this before. Do you know? So how does he kind of navigate some of what's going to come, determine who he's going to talk to, what's that like for him experientially, right? And we're going to see what the responses are from his family, his friends, his community, and where this idea of capitalism comes up a lot. Because one of the next chapters that we're going to see some stuff from is going to be from Surah Lahab, right? The prophet stands and tells people, and his uncle Abu Lahab, Taban laka alihada jamatana, may you be perished. This is why you've gathered us here. But he's annoyed that he got taken away from his merchant stall. You know, he wants to make money. He doesn't want people to tell him that he's got to be a better human being. Do you know? So we'll do that and start at closer to 7. I'll remember we're not starting at 7:15. I think actually Dr. Marwa doesn't have her class next week, right?
No, she does do that.
No, she does?
But she wants to do hers actually, start hers a little earlier.
At what time?
Finish at 6:45.
She finishes at 6:45?
Well, because she has to catch a train, so she's going to see if she could start a little earlier and then end earlier.
Okay. But we'll still keep this at 7, just so we stay consistent with it. And pray Isha probably in between, you know, so people want to come a little earlier. And you should come for Dr. Marwa's halakha. It's really amazing, mashallah. And you'll take a lot from it. A lot of us don't have access to individuals who are both trained in fields of mental health, as well as looking at it through the prism of religion and spirituality, right? So there's a lot of people who are good psychologists, but they just don't get what's it like to be a Muslim person. And there's a lot of Muslims who are psychologists, but they don't necessarily know or factor Islam into what they do. And counseling is like a unique endeavor. It's a one-on-one thing, but she's not counseling you in a halakha, but she's still talking very relevantly about how emotional wellness, mental health attaches to our spirituality. So if you can come earlier to be a part of that, you should definitely do that as well, inshallah. Okay, barakallahu fikum. So we'll see everyone next Wednesday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.